Mr. Grosshandler, welcome back.
Thanks, Rich. It's good to see you.
Yeah, so a lot's been going on since we last talked. You and I talk a lot about the temporary building regulations, and we've talked about all kinds of different things. Since we last talked, though, there's been a lot of information that's flying around. I've heard all kinds of things said about you. I've heard all kinds of things said about the whole process. Just, this seems to be a lot of confusion. So I'm glad to have you back. I want to address some of that right now. It's a small town. Rumors get spinning crazy. And Nosara still doesn't have a planned regular door, but we've been told it's happening with 3 years. I've had the chief engineer in Nicoya sit right there on camera and tell me it's going to be 3 years. But in the meantime, we're arguing over a lot of the temporary regulations. And some people think they're fantastic. Some people think they're not. We're going to get into that today. But can you help clarify some of the coconut wireless type stuff that's going on about you right now?
Sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I mean, anyone that's spent any amount of time in Nosara knows this coconut telegraph. And basically, the coconut telegraph is this phenomenon, which is a bit of a twisted game of telephone, right? Where the story kind of changes from one person to the next. I think, unfortunately, and you're trying to improve the situation with your podcast and some of the stuff that you're doing, but there's not a lot of really good sources of information in town because most of it's verbal. And in Nosara, amongst certain, social circles, information about people or happenings is almost like a currency. So, to kind of, repeat something that someone said to you, kind of starts factoring into the social fabric here. And in a very small town where it's tough to really get down to what's true and what's not, sometimes that coconut telegraph can just take on a life of its own. So, I'd say the first thing that I just want to make completely and absolutely clear is that, I am entirely in favor of environmental protection of the refuge, and for a planned regular door for Nicoya and for Nosara. Those two things are absolute, and I just want to make sure I put that on the record.
Okay, so again, to pause, to make sure this is clear, you are for regulations, you are for a planned regular door, and you are for protecting our environment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's number one. I think maybe before we get into a little bit of some of the other kind of misunderstandings or misinformation out there, there's certain things about myself, that I keep private, and maybe I should have come out, and maybe I should, be a little more involved in, meeting people and making sure that, people can have one-on-one conversations with me. I've made some efforts to that, but look, I've lived in Nosara for almost 9 years now, full time. I've been part of this community. I'm a business owner. I'm an employer. I invest in properties. I have a real estate business. I have a tourism and hospitality business. Well, one thing that's really important to me is the fact that I consider myself to be a law-abiding citizen, taxpayer, and that as a foreigner, I'm a guest in this country, and I have to be respectful to its laws, processes, culture, and language. I think participating in this community with the perspective of locals is really important because I see so many people come here with some kind of foreign perspectives, and they kind of push these foreign perspectives onto this place in general. And, most of my, let's say, positions at this point, I feel like really come from a perspective of someone who's been here, and has gone through red tape and bureaucracies and that knows the laws to an extent that I feel pretty confident in my assessment of this process and, and what's been, what's right about it in terms of what it's aiming for, but also, the inconsistencies and the problems.
So a lot of the public opinion about you is that you are the foreigner coming in to make the money and just leave. And you just told us that that's not you at all. You're actually looking at this from the perspective of the locals, and you feel that that's not being paid attention to. So is that pretty fair to say?
That's fair enough to say. I mean, look, I have my permanent residency without condition. I'm legally able to work. I'm eligible to start applying and going through the citizenship process this coming February.
Right. So you're not looking to take the money, do a mega development, and get out of here.
Yeah. So Guiones is my home. It's my primary residence. This is my children's home. They're both Costa Rican citizen. I mean, my son, I don't think has ever even used the word water. Okay. This is my life. This is my family's life. And, as far as my expectations go, I'm not going anywhere.
Gotcha. So you don't have any high-rise projects or 5-story developments in between Guiones and Palada planned, or anything like that?
No. So this is the other thing that seems to be circling around the community, is some idea that there's some giant towers or condos or, 10-story or 20-story buildings or whatever it is. I've heard about a 1,000-room Marriott that I was, paid to facilitate. None of these could be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty relieved to be kind of done with the last phase of construction in the hospitality project. But besides that, I'm involved in a pretty minimal joint venture that is building 2 very small houses in Guiones. These construction projects in the end are a 38% area coverage ratio, and they're one story. So these would essentially be completely and totally unaffected by any of the proposed regulations that are at play. This idea that somehow or another, I'm opposed to all of this because of something that it's stopping me from doing is completely and absolutely false.
Okay, so that's an interesting point. So let's get some clarity as to the temporary building regulations. It seems very fair to say you have some significant issues with them. Can we get into you helping us understand where you're coming from, and let's march into that side of the conversation.
And I think maybe that conversation starts with the firm that I hired that's called CLC Advisors. Now, this also kind of ties into with some of the prior conversation that we were just having in terms of misinformation and what's been put out to the community in newsletters and amongst conversations. Okay. As a local business owner, at this point, I employ, I think I'm almost up to about 120 employees amongst 14 or 15 different kind of entities and businesses. I have probably 200 plus like indirect employees through contractors and lawyers and you name it. I don't even want to say what my monthly payrolls and expenses are. But you include, CAHA and taxes and all this stuff. Like I play a pretty significant role in the economy here. And, because of this, it's really necessary at some point for me to be able to interact and communicate with government at a local and national level.
Okay, that makes sense. So what you're getting at with that is you're a player here and you should be able to talk to your government. That's essentially what you're saying, right? Yeah,
I mean, I would assume having conversations with the government is something that might be encouraged or looked on as like a civic duty, especially, in regards to, people providing employment and opportunities. And I think there's some sort of really bad misinterpretation of what this company does for me. These are licensed lawyers and communicators, and that's all they are.
But why do you need a PR firm to talk to your government?
Because there are certain and very specific laws about how you can participate within the government. I think that's the other thing that makes me a little bit different about a lot of the business people and foreigners that have come here, which is I like to kind of learn what the right way to do things is first and then kind of do it the right way. So, this has nothing to do with crafting some narrative or needing to, change some sort of public perspective. This is literally and only to have a conversation with a local government. And I just, for me, it seems like a pretty innocuous, responsible thing to do, especially considering, the people that I employ. And, the other part of this, I think there was some insinuations that it was somehow done in secret and that whatever I was communicating was, I needed to be exposed or who was behind it. But the reality is the firm CLC, they obey national and international standards of compliance. From the very first audience that was held in Nicoya, it was all public record. It was disclosed who they were, their license numbers, and who they worked for. And there hasn't ever been any moment where any of this has been done in secret or anything other than with full transparency.
So you don't have any backdoor dealings, or you're not pulling any strings or relationships to mess something up in some sort of malicious manner?
No. I mean, look. Having an actual zoning plan is really quite important. And to me, that's what I thought was happening in the first place.
Okay.
To kind of understand that that's not exactly where this went, to me was like really shocking. And, if I could go back and kind of do it over again, I think there's a lot of things I would change. I think, to that point, I'll take responsibility for some of my initial reactions. But, at this point, it does seem like the conversation has spread. It does seem like, there's a lot more people paying attention. and we'll see how this goes. I mean, I have a lot of other work to do. So having CLC to be, have the capacity of making these communications and to make sure that it's being done in the right way, to me is something that's just, I don't know, obvious.
All right. So when I spoke with Cookie from the NCA, she told me everything's processing fine, and they feel very confident that the studies and information and research that has been done is accurate, and the temporary building regulations, if they're not very, very good, they're very close to being good, and they're a wonderful thing. So I'm now interested in hearing your perspective on that.
I would say my concerns over the current path and process of the regulatory process are pretty specific. First off, I really think that this process to pass construction regulations has left a lot of people out of the conversation, and it didn't accomplish a true community participation from day one.
Now, why were people left out of the conversation?
I don't know why they were left out of the conversation, but
well, then how?
We went and checked a lot of the records of what the Committee Plan Regulador, essentially had done. It's all public record, and there was 28 meetings without a single mention of this to anyone in the Nosara area. I mean, that's maybe the first place to start here, which is, why not involve the community in order to kind of shape this policy, as opposed to do it behind closed doors and then to come and dictate it, essentially.
I got you. So you feel that this was shaped behind, like literally, as you just said, behind closed doors, and the community was not included?
Well, from what I understand, that was kind of admitted to and apologized for, but I don't think there was too much of a course correction. In terms of the public consultations that were held, these were held during working hours. These were very poorly attended, right? And the channel to give feedback essentially was only and exclusively through email. Well, you take a look at the last census here, and apparently less than 30% of people in the Nosara area even have internet access, no less, computers. And to have the public consultation during working hours with a formalized kind of input solely through an email address, that just by itself shows the process to be not inclusive.
When Josue came out to hear people and the email, you're saying that's not enough, that wasn't sufficient?
I mean, it was something, but no, it's not sufficient, and it's definitely outside of the parameters of the Urban Planning Act.
Okay, so you are for a plan reguladora. You want all efforts focused on that.
That's something I've been clear about, I think, since day one, which is what we actually need is a real regulatory plan that has zonification, that follows all of the proper laws and procedures. And, this is just the thing that I feel like this whole entire conversation has really taken, the eye off the ball in regards to, what this place really needs.
Okay, so specifically pertaining to the temporary building regulations, what bothers you about how they're set up right now most?
I would say the most important part is they're high, even if passed, it's highly likely that they're going to be upheld once they're challenged in the constitutional court or the Contencioso Administrativo court.
No, why is that?
Well, because there's only one real legal process that's defined that can achieve the goals that the community is aiming for, and that's defined by the Urban Planning Act. This topic could be completely and entirely put to rest by a simple inquiry to the Procuraduría General, which is basically the Attorney General. And if the Attorney General gives an opinion that this is legal, it gives a basis to move forward in a matter that doesn't risk all of the work, time, effort, and money that's essentially being put into this. Quite possibly is going to be wasted when the legislation is overturned by court.
Gotcha. So you're feeling this whole exercise could just be a colossal waste of time and money, and not focusing on where we should be going, which is the plan regulador.
Yeah, and why not find out if it's legal in the first place? It seems to me like it's a pretty simple process. I think what people say is, well, we don't have time for that. Okay, well, there's a balance to everything. And if this inquiry is made and it gives a legal basis, it seems like that would be a great way to go forward, knowing that, knowing what's in store for the future and giving a much higher level of confidence in this process, because
that's a fair point. I agree with
the
that.
process has been flawed. The technical studies, that are referenced, actually, one of them was overturned. And even in the process of publishing these rules, it was done wrong. Like the last publishing was done legally incorrect. It didn't give to the public after it was published, how much time there was to respond or how to respond. And because of those two parameters being left out of this process, they had to do it again. And what does that do? That's wasted time and it's wasted money. And it just doesn't give like a high level of confidence in the people that are, are in charge of this.
I got you. So let me ask you this. It seemed to me when the 42% figure came out of Nicoya, that created a bit of a panic, and people are like, oh, the town's going to be gone. We don't have time to wait 3, 4, 5 years for a plan regulador. We have to do something now to save Nosara. That's what I've heard said repeatedly. And do you agree or disagree with that?
I mean, this is another one of kind of the really tough conversations. I've seen different phases of kind of construction versus renovation versus people buying houses. And yeah, it does seem like there was a pretty substantial boom in, I would say not necessarily the number of projects, but the sizes of projects, right? Like people are building big giant houses. To have a relevant statistical analysis of what's actually happening versus cherry picking some data to me, also seems like, what would be the smartest thing to help in planning the future of the community. So, I'd love to see the statistics that happened. I believe those numbers were from 2017 to 2018. I'd love to see 2018 and 2019. I'd love to see a real statistical method applied to the actual data. But I mean, I've tried and it's tough to get the data. It's not an easy thing to do, even though it's all public record. It's, it's an effort and, like I said, like I have a lot of other responsibilities and people depending on me. So I can't, waste all my time trying to dig up, the percentage increases and decreases on a year over year basis. But you have a very small window of data that's been used for that. And to me, that data is easy to put into newspaper articles and such. But it's just a talking point without any other kind of relevant data around it.
And one could also argue, rather than debating the growth from last year to this year, let's focus on the plan regulador.
Well,
and march towards that and use every bit of energy towards
what was the growth rate, from 2010 to 2011, 2011 to 12? How about a trend? I mean, anybody that has any sort of mathematical or statistical background knows it's easy to cherry pick, small windows of information to, kind of make a point.
I get you. So essentially you're saying you feel some of the figures and the information that's come out, it's inducing a bit of an unnecessary panic. The sky's not completely falling.
I mean, is the sky falling? Definitely not. Is there a reason for concern? Absolutely.
Well, I get you. And remember, a lot of people listening to this currently think you're up to some sort of mega development too.
Yeah. I mean, look, at first it was kind of a little flattering. And then when I realized how far some of these rumors went, I was like, oh, wow. Like I need to have a conversation with some people. I mean, look, like, again, like this is my home, So you feel like you're being cast in an unfair light? I don't necessarily know if I'd say that. I mean, I think that it's part of this mechanism, this coconut telegraph where, people know that if I say this to this person, they're going to say it to that person and around it goes. So,
it seems interesting. You're the one speaking up. Because I know a lot of people talk to you and you shared this with me and a lot of people talk to me too. And one thing I've noticed, a lot of people around here who have real issues with it aren't willing to speak up. Do you think that's because of social pressure?
Absolutely. I mean, let's be perfectly clear. I mean, this place has survived on essentially mechanisms of social pressure to kind of, for people to subsist here. And it's still part of it. If you're out of line with what, certain people in certain positions say, your reputation may be attacked and you may be kind of socially bullied into either falling in line or keeping your mouth shut. And I think this is just one of these things that for me, like, I'm okay saying what I think and doing what I say. I think for some people, it's kind of a perpetual point of like, there must be something wrong with this guy, but.
Gotcha. So your conscience is clear. You sleep fine at night.
I sleep very well at night. Well, if I sleep at all. Sometimes.
You got 2 kids.
Yeah, 2 kids, a lot of work, and it's November, right?
But you're not losing sleep over this.
No. I mean, look, in the end, I feel like, managed to kind of have some deeper conversations with other people in the community, and it sounds like the conversations that need to be had are starting to kind of filter out. And like I said, my role in this Maybe it started in one way, but I think, it's going in a much different one. This is not something that I need to waste any more time or energy on. I just hope that, like I said, I hope that like people really understand kind of, what the kind of two routes here are. And when you kind of have an absolute decision to commit and only do one thing without listening to the perspective of the other side and maybe some of the mistakes, or let's say after admitting to mistakes, making some course corrections, there's nothing I can do about that. But, I'm not the only one involved in this. And I'd say the chances of there being a constitutional challenge if this is passed is probably near 100%.
Gotcha. So if this is passed,
you're talking probably anywhere between 6 to 30 different parties are already at that stage, and for them, they're just waiting for it.
Wow, that's kind of unfortunate to hear. But
I don't know. Maybe look, there are laws in this country. There are processes, and maybe they take a long time, and maybe certain people that are foreigners that are used to, a different process and structure don't agree with it. But in the end, things tend to seem to work. I've seen it myself. Just really slow, and it's a lot different than what people are used to.
Yeah, that's a fair point too. So let me ask you this. Who do you think the temporary building regulations are affecting in a negative way the most? Is it you, the developer? Is it someone 2 kilometers back? Like, talk us through that. Like, who's getting affected by this in a negative way?
So let's talk about who it benefits first.
Okay, fine.
I've been buying and selling properties here. I own properties personally. I own my house, and the people that will definitely benefit from this is people who own properties, right? So any regulations that kind of, let's say, restrict supply, or it's pretty obvious what happens is values go up, things become more scarce, and to that effect, I'd actually be a direct beneficiary if these regulations were in effect tomorrow and completely and totally legitimized and approved by the government.
I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to throw out the ever rare opinion from me on this, because I'm tired of hearing it said. A lot of people are like, realtors don't like the temporary regulations because it's going to affect their business in a bad way. I actually disagree. I think if the temporary building regulations go into effect, I actually think property values close to the beach and guiones and whatnot are going to go up. So I actually think it's a benefit for the realtors. So I think it's an unfair argument that people are making.
If real estate prices go up when people sell them, the same percentage commissions is more money. So to that effect, these regulations actually probably will help the local real estate agents in terms of future earnings. Now having said that, the thing that kind of, let's say, can hurt the market is uncertainty in terms of legal security. When people make investments, they kind of check the laws and the lay of the land. And if the lay of the land is essentially kind of turned upside down with, in something that's considered to be a process outside of what's legally defined, it can create some short-term uncertainty, but in the end, the effect is going to be the same, which is increased real estate prices. In terms of who it'll affect the worst is, kind of, I hate to say this, but it comes down to a bit of like a difference of, benefit versus hardship between kind of economic classes. You have a lot of wealthy foreigners that have multi-million-dollar homes and $20, $50, or $100 million in the bank. That for them, this place is a retirement community to kind of do as they see fit. But there's an entire other portion of this town that are people who work, that are people who need to work, that are people who have businesses, and I think really a lot of them will be the kind of most negatively affected by this. For instance, for the hotel, we rent a building that's 3.9 kilometers inland. It's 3.9 kilometers from the refuge. Theoretically, it would be contained within this restricted area. Now, this apartment kind of complex that we rent, I think we house, 20 people, 22 people. And without these 22 people, we wouldn't be able to operate the hotel. And the people that we employ, they're all locals that already live here. It would be difficult for us to give them jobs. And we need it. Now, this complex has 5 stories. It's owned by a Nosara family. It was built by them. It's on their own land. We pay them a monthly rent because they handle the maintenance and everything. To prevent someone like that, in the future an opportunity to do the same thing, to realize the patrimony of their, their land rights and their ownership rights, some of which have been passed down for generations from parents to families, to specifically deal with some people that are, probably distastefully overbuilding in the K section. I mean, to me, that's a bit of a problem.
I got you. So your opinion, it's the working people who have to hustle and make it, and then also the people who might be at the lower end of the economic stratum. They're the folks who are going to get punished the most because they have less opportunity for personal gain via inheriting property or building a complex, like you said, just to rent out, that might be 5 stories high, but you said it's what, 3.9 kilometers inland?
Yeah.
Well, the 5 stories is where people listening to this kind of just cringe. They're like,
I
5
get
stories,
it.
that's bad.
I get it. You say 5 stories and people think you're going to build it in the refuge, but 5 stories, 3.9 kilometers from the beach. And by the way, it has like a mountain in between it. Look, I get that all the light, all the light emissions can kind of collectively contribute. I get that there needs to be something. But I just don't think that this whole thing, a real inclusive conversation has been hashed out yet. It hasn't been.
Do you think it's going to happen?
I don't know. I mean, I hope that it does. I mean, I hope that at this point, maybe the conversation can kind of change direction and people can actually say like, well, one way or another, this seems like there's going to be some problems. So what do we do to kind of course correct here? And I just don't think there's been any course correction yet.
Well, I guess I should commend you for coming in and saying maybe I didn't handle the beginning all that well, and you're trying to promote that conversation right now. Is that what's happening? I
mean, I'm much less interested. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I'm also here to live life and to enjoy the things that I enjoy doing. I'm working on a new trails project for mountain biking that's going to be awesome. I just I finished the construction project at basically the athletic center that's part of the whole Gilded Iguana brand. And I've spent the last maybe month taking up a new hobby and learning jiu-jitsu, BJJ.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
That's thanks in some part to your, help in keeping, bringing this teacher here and kind of getting the ball rolling. But it's great. It's humbling. It's great exercise. And I think a lot of the guys that actually go and roll with and practice with are employees, and they get to beat up on their boss for a little bit.
Nice. So you're the punching bag right now?
I am basically a tackling dummy at this point. I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's a lot of fun.
While we're on the subject, let's go ahead and talk about the new Gilded stuff over there. Because, of course, on the street, when Gilded was getting redone, it's all gone to hell. Gilded's gone. That being said, you guys, to your credit, I'll say it publicly. I've said it behind your back, and I don't need to say it to your face. You did it, but you guys did a really good job honoring the environment and doing a lot of the right things that you didn't have to do. We've talked about that before a couple episodes ago. So shout out to you there. But then when you went to go do would you call it commercial center?
Athletic center.
The
it's now called the athletic center. So the athletic center is a bike shop, which was already open. Everybody kind of knows about, but now that the whole place is finished, the bike shop is kind of on another level, and it's a really cool spot. Besides the bike shop, we have a gym. We have basically a couple of full-time employees that are basically professional trainers that are certified trainers. We offer basically kind of monthly membership packages similar to the surf club, by which instead of paying, per class, you're basically paying, for a month or a couple of months, where people come and get unlimited fitness classes. There's an entire online platform where you can pick the classes you want to go to. I've taken a couple classes. The trainers are great, and I think it's really affordable. One thing that's really nice too is the classes start at 6 a.m. and go till about 8 o'clock at night. So the distribution of people using the gym is typically in the morning. It's people that have jobs in hospitality or need to get to their day jobs. They come in, they get their exercise in, they go to work. During the day, we have a couple of yoga classes, some other kind of fitness and training classes that are more oriented towards the tourists that want to sleep late or be at the beach in the morning. And it's a really nice combination of offering something for locals.
That's cool. So it's got a nice balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
I saw it yesterday when I was dropping off the kids. By the way, my kids essentially live there at this point.
Yeah, well, your kids are both really gifted and talented jiu-jitsu and martial arts practitioners. And
thanks, man. That's cool.
It's pretty impressive, actually.
They're getting after it.
They really do. I mean, I think I'm scared of them.
Good. Well, you have a daughter, and if I could give you any advice, I would say arm your daughter, because there's a lot of handsome gentlemen around here, a lot of tourists, and a whole lot of everything. And
Well, she just finally got the bug for surfing, so we'll see how long it takes to get bit by the jiu-jitsu bug. But in the meantime, the studios are also not just used for jiu-jitsu. We have boxing classes. We also have yoga classes. We have 4 daily yoga classes. We have full-time yoga teachers. It's a slightly different model than I think what most other people are doing.
So what'd you say? So you got yoga, jiu-jitsu, boxing, and Kai's teaching some karate over there.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's news to me, but this also
apparently
goes to show.
Apparently you have karate too.
I mean, honestly, I don't know. We have a great management team there. That's also a bit of my style is, we have kind of high level management that, that kind of is a top down management structure. So if there's karate, then by all means you plug it if you know.
Well, actually, I'll give a shout out to Miss Isis, but because everything will go under her. But at the facility, they are doing some karate lessons.
Cool.
And again, if for anybody listening, if they want to get their kids involved in that stuff, let them take a lesson from another kid, like for a girl, find a teenage girl that your daughter can take from, because they'll look up to her.
Yeah.
But if it's a scary guy, they might not be into it as much. And the same thing for the boy. One of the reasons why Daniel's so successful is because his energy is contagious, and he is a big kid.
Yeah.
So he rolls around with the kids, and they bond with them, and that makes him want to come back. It creates an interesting environment.
It's really cool. Well, so far so good. Yeah, really happy.
Well, good on you. It also seems like a decent fit in the neighborhood. A lot of people were worried that was going to turn into some sort of mini mall type thing.
Yeah,
and it didn't seem like that's the case to your credit.
No, and you know what? I have to give all that credit to the architect, to Ben, basically, and his team. Well, look, when it came to the hotel, like, there were certain parameters that we didn't kind of want to cross the line on. Mm-hmm. We gave the architecture team a little bit of like leeway in terms of design concept for the small spa that we built like this part of the hotel. So then when it came down to this project, we kind of basically gave them, I would say, 95% carte blanche. And what they've done with the place, it's like a masterpiece of design and perspective. It almost resembles one of these sculptures that when you look at it from one side, it's like a mermaid, and from another side, it's a unicorn. Like as you move around the property, the kind of perspectives change, and the lighting and the shapes change. And it's just it's really something. And I think Ben really has a personal he's personally drawn towards projects that involve public spaces. I think public spaces in terms of human history used to be something that was part of every civilization, every city, every town, and that that's just not how it is now. It usually comes down to dollars and cents. So there's very few people actually making public spaces.
Now, how mad would you be if that facility was built on the lot next to your house?
Anytime something's getting built next to you, there's reasons for concern. As a neighborhood shifts from, kind of residential towards more of like commercial and tourism based, circumstances change and things change. And, not everyone that lives in the neighborhood that has their own personal house there is a fan of it. Some people love it. I think the people that kind of knew what was happening are the ones that are a little more, open to it. And the people that had been there for, let's say, 12 to 15 years, maybe, less open to it. But the bottom line is we do everything we can to coordinate with neighbors and to be good neighbors. I think there was a couple of initial launch events where we maybe had a couple sound systems that were too loud, that we've also learned from our lessons, and keeping things civil and neighborly. But the best thing I could say to the neighbors is come out and check it out. Like, you might actually be surprised how much you like it, or you might be surprised how much you hate it.
I gotcha. Well, at least you gave them the invite, so that's positive. So you're a fan of turning this into foot traffic area and whatnot. Now, what's your opinions on doing the pavers in the north end of Guiones? Are you a fan of that or not a fan?
I don't know. I mean, I have mixed feelings, and I know that there is a newly formed road committee for North Guiones. I'm not on it. Again, like my plate is full. And I think the first thing they're starting on is drainage, like coordinated drainage, and kind of working with some of the municipal engineers to kind of look forward and prevent some of the problems, that have come from not having a formalized committee and people looking at this. But in terms of pavers, I mean, I like I like the dirt. You know, I mean, it's not good for dust and everything like that. And the Malaza can get really expensive, but to me, it kind of is part of the personality and definition of the town. And, you know, I think that, I think it's a conversation for the community to have together, because it does sound like there are people that have an interest in that.
Gotcha, but your vote would be keep the internal roads dirt.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's
Probably.
it's a little selfish to say that. But like, you want to know my initial just personal reaction? Yeah, I think the dirt roads are fantastic.
Gotcha. So again, thank you for coming in today. But jumping back to the main topic at hand, we have the situation that we're in. There's been a lot of crazy speculation. We've talked about the coconut wireless and all this. Can you kind of put it all into one synopsis, kind of where you coming from, and get it all off your chest while you have this platform?
I would kind of sum it up with, you know, I trust that no law-abiding authority would kind of pass the regulations after such a questioned process filled with kind of irregularities and, you know, not by the real process of the law that everybody needs. In the end, you know, it is about environmental protection, but it's also about the legal mechanisms available for proper planning and zoning in Nosara and Nicoya.
All right. Well, I want to thank you once again for coming on. Next time we come on, I want to talk about something different.
Yeah, next time we should talk about real estate. You know, I think that you and I, it's one thing that when you started this podcast that like, we were like, yeah, it'd be great. We can, you know, chat about this, chat about that as real estate professionals. Or, I mean, for me, it's, you know, maybe 5 to 10% of my kind of daily responsibilities is still in that realm. But amongst real estate people, you know, there are perspectives and stories, that I think are, are very much contained just to that small part of the community. And
no, that's a good point. I need to do an episode on real estate. I just stayed away from it for many reasons. Yeah. But I'm really enjoying this, and this, I didn't do this to make money directly through this. I did this for a couple of reasons. I did this to get to the source and have conversations like we're having right now. There's a massive amount of misinformation about everything regarding this whole subject that we're talking about, and this is a platform for people to hear it directly from the person. So.
Well, hopefully this can clear up some of the stuff out there. And I guess the very last thing I want to say is, if anybody has any questions they want to ask me, or anything, any conversations they want to have me, like, I'm approachable and I'm available. And I encourage people to come and have conversations with me, because in a small community with a lack of real kind of official news or information, just be careful what you hear and what you believe. And, if you want to have a conversation with someone, it's a very small town, and it's the best thing to do.
Gotcha. Oh, that's really good advice. My last question, I asked the Civic Association for their last recording if a situation arises where we could have a public discourse, and I volunteer to moderate it from a central standpoint. Would you be willing to come have a public discussion if we were able to get parties at each side to bring some of the concerns to light?
I would say a public discussion is great, but I wouldn't want it to be something where it's just like me and someone else, because to my point, the entire conversation should be had by the community.
Well, that's kind of the point.
Yeah. Well, look, a public, some sort of forum or meetings, that'd be great. I mean, why not? Like, that's exactly probably what we need.
It's just something I've realized, because so many people talk to me about this.
I just get this image in my head of, podiums and a debate stage. There's elections local, there's elections everybody's talking about for the United States. And you say this, and I just think of, people holding their thumbs like this and giving very generic answers to raise their popularity levels. So
this wouldn't be like a U.S. style presidential debate.
No, listen.
But I've been thinking about it, and I wouldn't mind transitioning into this. I've been thinking about a couple of things. I've been learning a lot listening to everyone, and so many people approach me to the side, and I've just realized there's still a lot of misinformation flying around.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get that out of the way, because I really think the solution for all of this, no matter what side you're on in anything, is really communication. If nothing else, I would like for people, if they're going to argue, make sure they're arguing about what they mean to be arguing about. Because what I've noticed is some people, well, let's just say this. Some people are getting along who actually disagree, and some people who are disagreeing and think they dislike each other actually are pretty close. And this weird situation has brought that out.
That's a quintessential Nosara right there.
Oh man, yeah. All right, this episode's over. Thanks for coming on, man.
Really glad and looking forward to the next time. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks, Jeff.